Ludwig II, Ludwig Otto Friedrich Wilhelm, was King of Bavaria from 1864 until his death in 1886. He died at the young age of 40. He is sometimes called the Swan King or Der Märchenkönig, the Fairy Tale King. He also held the titles of Count Palatine of the Rhine, Duke of Bavaria, Duke of Franconia, and Duke in Swabia. Ludwig ascended to the throne in 1864 at the age of 18. 2 years later, Bavaria and Austria fought a war against Prussia lasting only a matter of weeks, which they lost. However, in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, Bavaria sided with Prussia in their successful war against France. Despite Ludwig's reluctance to support the unification of Germany, Bavaria and 21 other monarchies, Bavaria became part of the new German Empire in 1871, with Wilhelm I, the King of Prussia and Ludwig's cousin, as the German Emperor. Bavaria retained a large degree of autonomy within the empire under the new imperial constitution. Ludwig increasingly withdrew from day-to-day affairs of state in favor of extravagant artistic and architectural projects. He commissioned the construction of lavish palaces, Neuschwanstein Castle, Linderhof Palace, and Herrenchiemsee. He was also a devoted patron of the composer Richard Wagner. Ludwig spent all his own private royal revenues on these projects, borrowed extensively, and defied all attempts by his ministers to restrain him. This extravagance was used against him to declare him insane, an accusation that has since come under scrutiny. Ludwig was taken into custody and effectively deposed on the 12th of June 1886, and he and his doctor were found dead on the following day. His death was ruled to be a suicide, but this too has been disputed. It is thought that maybe he was murdered. Today, his architectural and artistic legacy includes many of Bavaria's most important tourist attractions. Schloss Neuschwanstein, Neuschwanstein Castle, is a dramatic Romanesque fortress with soaring fairytale towers. It is situated on an alpine crag above Ludwig's childhood home, Castle Hohenschwangau, Upper Swan County Palace. Hohenschwangau was a medieval knight's castle that his parents had purchased. Ludwig reputedly had seen the location and conceived of building a castle there while still a boy. In 1869, Ludwig oversaw the laying of the cornerstone for Schloss Neuschwanstein on a breathtaking mountaintop site. The walls of Neuschwanstein are decorated with frescoes depicting scenes from the legends used in Wagner's operas, including Tannhäuser, Tristan und Isolde, Lohengrin, Parsifal, and the somewhat less than mystic Die Meistersinger. Few places on earth look more like storybook illustrations than Neuschwanstein Castle. With its towers, turrets, frescoes, and throne hall, Neuschwanstein looks like it was plucked straight from your favorite fairy tale. But the story behind this over-the-top palace nestled in the Bavarian Alps is less idyllic. King Ludwig II of Bavaria commissioned the cliffside castle in 1868, just 2 years after Austria and Bavaria were conquered by Prussia during the Austro-Prussian War, also known as the 7 Weeks' War, effectively stripping Ludwig II of his powers. He quickly retreated into a private fantasy world, surrounding himself with opulent castles where he could live out his dreams of being a true, sovereign king. Ludwig II never saw the final Neuschwanstein, according to the Bavarian Castle Administration. He died in 1886, and the final towers weren't completed until 1892. But within weeks of his sudden and mysterious death, the magnificent castle was opened to the public, where it quickly became one of the region's most visited attractions. The Gateway building was completed first, which had its topping out ceremony on the 11th of June 1872 and was ready for occupation at the end of 1873. For years Ludwig II used the upper floor as provisional accommodation when he visited the site. Building of the palace commenced in September 1872. For structural reasons, the latest technology was required in order to incorporate the large throne hall subsequently requested by the king, which was built as an encased steel construction. The topping out ceremony was on the 29th of January 1880. The decoration and technical fittings of the interior were only completed in mid-1884, but without all the final details. Ludwig II only ever saw his new castle as a building site. The Bower and the Square Tower, simplified versions of the originally planned buildings, were not completed until 1892. Neuschwanstein illustrates the ideals and longings of Ludwig II more vividly than any of his other buildings. The castle was not designed for royal representation, but as a place of retreat. Here Ludwig II escaped into a dream world, the poetic world of the Middle Ages. The picture cycles of Neuschwanstein were inspired by the operas of Richard Wagner, to whom the king dedicated the castle. The pictures were not, however, directly modeled on Wagner's works, but on the medieval legends that the composer had also taken as the basis for his works. The pictures on the walls of the castle deal with love and guilt, repentance and salvation. Kings and knights, poets and lovers people the rooms. There are 3 main figures: the poet Tannhäuser, the swan knight Lohengrin and his father, The Grail King Parzival, Parsifal. These were Ludwig's models and kindred spirits. A further leitmotif of the interiors is the swan. The swan was the heraldic animal of the Counts of Schwangau, whose successor the king considered himself to be. It is also the Christian symbol of the purity for which Ludwig strived. Religious and political ideas were involved in the planning of the castle. This can be seen in particular in the throne hall. The paintings here show how Ludwig saw kingship by the grace of God, as a holy mission, with powers that the Bavarian king had never possessed. On the walls of the lower hall are illustrations of the Sigurd saga from the Old Norse saga, Edda, a collection of sagas, songs and sayings. Sigurd corresponds to the Siegfried of the Middle High German Nibelungenlied. Marble portals open into the throne room on the west side and the royal apartments on the opposite side. This sumptuous, church-like hall with its massive, 4-meter-high chandelier occupies the third and fourth floors and the entire west section of the palace. The throne hall was inspired by Byzantine churches and in particular the All Saints' Court Church in Munich. In the northern apse there was to be a throne in place of the altar, but this was never constructed after the death of the king. This combination of church and throne room illustrates Ludwig's interpretation of kingship. He saw himself not just as a king by God's grace, but also as a mediator between God and the whole world. This idea is also expressed in the cupola, which is decorated with stars, and the floor mosaic beneath it, which shows the earth with its plants and animals. Beneath the cupola are representatives of pre-Christian kingdoms. The pictures in the apse area show Christ, the 12 apostles and 6 holy kings, while the deeds of the kings and other saints are illustrated on the walls. The throne hall was not intended for state occasions. It is an expression of Ludwig's expectations of kingship. The dining room. The apartments of Ludwig II are entered through the oak-paneled anteroom on the third floor. An electric bell system was installed in 1885 so that the servant on duty here could be summoned from any other room. Wolfram von Eschenbach and other Minnesingers feature in the dining room murals, which are framed with oak paneling decorated with bas-relief carvings. On the dining table is a centerpiece in marble and gilt bronze, which shows Siegfried fighting the dragon. As in all the king's rooms, the textiles are very elaborate. Here they are made of red silk with gold embroidery and trimmings. As in all the residences of Ludwig II, the king's bedroom is particularly sumptuous. The leitmotif is the legend of Tristan and Isolde, and the two main characters feature not only in the murals, but also in the carvings on the door and the ceramic figures on the tiled stove. The state bed in the neo-Gothic style and the seat coverings are in blue silk, with embroidered and appliqued lions, swans, crowns, lilies and the Bavarian coat of arms. The oratory adjacent to the bedroom is also in the neo-Gothic style. The murals, glass windows and the middle picture on the altar feature Louis IX of France, the patron saint of the king. There was a further connection between Ludwig II and the ruling Bourbon family. King Louis XVI, a direct descendant of Louis IX, was the godfather of his grandfather King Ludwig I. The dressing room is decorated in the style of a garden hall with an illusionistic ceiling painting of a garden bower with a trellis of vines open to the sky. The murals between the paneling show scenes from the life and poems of Walther von der Vogelweide, circa 1170 to 1230, and Hans Sachs, 1494 to 1576. Above the arch leading to the oriel recess are half-length portraits of both poets. The seat covers and the curtains are made of violet silk magnificently embroidered in gold with an elaborate design of leaves, tendrils and pairs of peacocks. In the oriel recess is the king's jewelry box. The L-shaped salon has an alcove furnished with chairs and separated from the rest of the room by columns. The large oak cupboard is modeled on an item of furniture from the Wartburg and is decorated with scenes from medieval poems. The murals in this room show scenes from the Lohengrin saga, which Ludwig II identified with in particular on account of the Grail Knight theme and the swan motif. The swan was also Ludwig's heraldic animal as a knight of Schwangau. As in the bedroom, the curtains and coverings are made of blue silk and embroidered with swans and lilies. Between the salon and the study is a room that would not normally be found in a royal apartment, a small grotto. The set designer August Dirigal created the artificial dripstone cave, which originally had colored lighting and a waterfall. It was based on the idea of the Horselberg in the Tannhäuser saga. A glass door which opens by sliding down into the rock leads from the grotto to the conservatory. Through the large glass panes there is an uninterrupted view of the Alpine foothills. The small fountain in this room was intended for a Moorish hall, which was not however completed. The murals show the Tannhäuser saga. As in the opera of the same name, this is linked with the singers' contest on the Wartburg. The king worked at the large table in the center of the room, on which his writing set still stands. The cupboard was used to store the castle plans and drafts of Neuschwanstein. Elaborate carvings cover the beams and consoles of the ceiling. The oak-paneled ante-room or adjutant room is furnished with a table, chairs and a tiled stove, as well as a couch for the use of the servant waiting on the king at night. From the upper hall on the 4th floor, a marble portal on the west side leads to the gallery of the throne hall, and 2 marble portals on the east side lead into the singers' hall. The murals illustrate the Gudrun saga from the Old Norse Edda, the continuation of the Sigurd saga. On the short, western side is the singers' bower, separated from the rest of the room by steps and 3 arcades, and with a small gallery above it. The murals in the hall do not, however, deal primarily with the singers' contest but with the saga of Parzival and the Holy Grail. The bower, which resembles a stage, is painted with a forest scene, the sacred forest that surrounds the castle of the Holy Grail. Parzival's son is the swan knight Lohengrin, with whom the picture cycle ends. Depicted on the high coffered ceiling are the signs of the zodiac. Like the throne hall, this hall was also never used for large banquets or musical performances. It was Ludwig's monument to the knights and legends of medieval times. Tannhäuser, Parzival and Lohengrin were the figures with whom the king had identified since his youth. Running along the long, north side is a gallery, with Fleotanes and Quixote, the authors or translators of the Grail saga, depicted on the consoles. Behind the retaining wall of the gallery is a passage with a colored coffered ceiling painted with scrolls bearing the names of minnesingers. On the opposite window wall, the ceiling consoles are carved with figures and symbols connected with the Parzival legends, such as the winged Lucifer, who during his fall lost a precious stone from his crown, from which the Holy Grail was later made. The kitchen was equipped with the latest technology of the day. It included a large stove and a sideboard, a large and a small spit, a built-in roasting oven with a plate warmer, a baking oven, a mortar and a fish tank. Adjacent to it are the pantry, with a built-in crockery cupboard and glass partitioned room for the chef de cuisine, and the scullery. Ludwig II also built Linderhof Palace, Herrenchiemsee Palace, and Munich Residenz Palace, the royal apartment. These palaces will be featured in future videos. Please subscribe so that you won't miss out.